Before sunrise in the mountains of El Salvador, a fortress the world was never meant to see begins to wake. Behind miles of concrete, steel, and electric barriers, the most feared men in Central America live under a level of control the world has rarely witnessed. No voices, no sunlight, no contact with the outside world ever again. Here, names don't matter, only the crimes they once commanded. Some of these inmates orchestrated terror that shaped an entire country. Others enforced violence with a level of coldness that stunned investigators. Many entered as teenagers and rose to become the architects of some of the region's darkest years. Inside this megastructure known as CECOT, escape is not a possibility. It's not even a thought. Every door, every wall, every beam of light is designed to erase the idea of freedom itself. This is not a prison. This is a sealed world, built to contain men the government says should never walk free again. Welcome to the world's highest security megaprison, a place where the most dangerous, the most feared, and the most ruthless are kept under total silence and control. Before we dive in, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to HFD Achive Crimes. Every bit of support helps us reveal the hidden truths behind the world's prisons and crime documentaries. Now, let's go inside. Before CECOT became the most heavily controlled prison on Earth, it began as a question whispered through the streets of El Salvador. How do you contain an enemy that already controls the nation? For years, entire neighborhoods lived under the rule of gangs whose influence stretched far beyond graffiti-marked territories. They dictated who could walk a street, who could open a shop, who could survive the night. Even the police hesitated to enter some areas without military backup. By 2022, the violence had carved deep scars into a country of barely 6 million people. Extortion was routine, fear was constant, and crime groups operated with a level of coordination that rivaled governments. When President Bukele launched the extraordinary crackdown in March of that year, El Salvador changed overnight. Thousands were taken off the streets in a vast security operation unlike anything the country had seen. Buses rolled through the darkness, carrying men chained from wrist to ankle. Head down, silent, unmoving. Entire columns of suspects, many tattooed with symbols of allegiance, were transported in tightly organized convoys. For the first time in decades, the gangs were not the ones giving orders. They were receiving them. But the arrests were only the beginning. Authorities needed a place capable of holding thousands of high-risk inmates, many of whom had led criminal networks for years. Ordinary prisons were not enough. Maximum security facilities weren't enough. Even isolation units across the country weren't enough. What the government envisioned had never existed in the region before. A complex so fortified, so controlled, that communication, movement, and influence would be reduced to zero. The answer was a structure built far from major cities, hidden behind layers of concrete, steel, and electric fencing. Engineers worked at a pace that stunned observers. 8 massive modules, each capable of holding thousands, began rising from the ground like a city within a city. Guard towers were placed with mathematical precision, security rings were designed to detect every step, and entire power and water systems were built underground so no outside interference could affect operations. CECOT was not built to punish. It was built to contain the men who once shaped a nation through fear. By the time the final walls were raised, the world had never seen anything like it. A fortress engineered not just for security, but for total control. No sunlight in cells, no contact with families, no phones, no voices from the outside world. Everything inside was designed to achieve a single outcome: silence. And it was here, inside this newly forged labyrinth of steel and concrete, that the government prepared to send the first wave of inmates. Thousands of men who once dictated life on the streets, now entering a place built to erase their power completely. Long before the world heard the name CECOT, El Salvador was living through nights that felt like war. Entire neighborhoods shut their doors before sunset. Families slept in silence, hoping no one knocked. Businesses paid for protection they never asked for. It wasn't just fear, it was control, exercised street by street. When the government finally decided to dismantle that system, the shift began quietly. No speeches, no announcements, just the sudden appearance of security forces sweeping through districts that had not seen government presence in years. What followed became one of the fastest and most controversial security crackdowns ever attempted in modern history. Arrests moved in waves, first dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. For the authorities, each operation meant removing another set of figures who once dictated life in entire communities. For many families, it meant watching decades of intimidation disappear almost overnight. For others, it brought confusion and fear that someone innocent might be swept up with the guilty. As days turned into weeks, the country's detention centers filled faster than anyone anticipated. Every facility, from regional holding cells to major penitentiaries, reached maximum capacity. Crowding turned into overflow, and overflow turned into crisis. The country had changed almost instantly, but the infrastructure had not. That was when the idea of something unprecedented began forming inside government strategy meetings. A single, unified, high-capacity prison unlike anything the region had ever seen. A place designed not just to hold inmates, but to end the influence of organized groups completely. Plans were drafted in secrecy. Blueprints, maps, concrete calculations, perimeter designs, and security diagrams. The structure they envisioned would require its own utilities, its own security zone, its own communications blackout, and a layout built around one principle: control at every second, in every direction. Meanwhile, on the streets, the nighttime operations continued. Buses rolled out with rows of detainees seated shoulder to shoulder, heads lowered, wrists restrained. Every convoy moved under armed escort in complete silence. Within months, tens of thousands had been detained, a scale that made global headlines and divided international opinion. But inside the country, one thing was clear: the old order was over. As the number of detainees rose, construction crews worked around the clock at a guarded site far from cities and towns. The location was chosen for one reason: isolation. Concrete walls grew taller by the day. Perimeter rings expanded. Towers appeared across the horizon. Floodlights were installed before the roofs were even completed. The structure was becoming real. Immense. Unavoidable. By the time the world first saw the facility, it was already operational, already staffed, already fortified. What began as a response to chaos was transforming into a new system of total containment, and thousands of inmates were about to experience it firsthand as they were transported to its gates. The stage was set, the buses were ready, and CECOT was waiting. Stepping deeper into CECOT is like crossing into a world designed to erase the idea of freedom. Every hallway, every checkpoint, every reinforced door speaks a single message. Nothing leaves, nothing escapes, nothing moves without permission. The prison wasn't built to hold men. It was built to contain the kind of power they once carried. Inside the modules, the atmosphere shifts instantly. The silence is heavy, almost unnatural. Hundreds of eyes follow every movement, yet none of the inmates speak. They know the rules. They know what happens when the silence breaks. Order here is not encouraged. It is enforced layer by layer, hour by hour, with a precision that feels military. The cells are arranged like stacked metal chambers, each one holding far more bodies than space should allow. The air is still. The lights stay on day and night. In this place, time has no rhythm. There is no day, no night, only observation. Cameras track every corner. Guards monitor walkways above the cells. Every step echoes like it's being recorded, because it is. The prisoners themselves look different from the world they once ruled. Many arrived with reputations that shook entire neighborhoods. Now, stripped of control, stripped of influence, stripped of everything except their uniform and their place in line, they move with mechanical precision. No gestures, no signals, no freedom to express anything. Their entire world has been reduced to the space between the metal bars and the floor beneath their feet. Even the most notorious gang leaders, The ones who once commanded fear with a single word now blend into the uniform silence. Tattoos that once symbolized dominance have become meaningless decorations inside a system built to erase identity. Inside these walls, no symbol, no number, no past carries power. Only the rules do. The environment is designed to break communication, to prevent alliances, to remove every possibility of planning. Even a glance toward another cell means nothing here. They cannot talk. They cannot whisper. They cannot even step forward without permission. This structure forces them to exist as individuals, not groups, a reality they never experienced on the outside. But for the guards working these modules, control must be absolute. They monitor every motion, watching for patterns, watching for intention, watching for anything unusual. Their job is not only dangerous, it is relentless. Between them and the inmates stands only discipline, protocol, and years of training. And while the world outside imagines chaos, inside this fortress the silence is the real story. A silence built from routine, surveillance, restriction, and the weight of knowing that once a person enters this place, they're never leaving again. If the modules reveal how CECOT controls the body, the deeper levels of the prison reveal how it controls the mind. Here, the system becomes even more precise, even more restrictive, and even more intentional. Everything that happens inside these walls serves a purpose: to dismantle influence, to cut off communication, and to separate every inmate from the world beyond the gates. Movement inside CECOT follows a choreography that never changes. Every shift of a guard, every opening of a door, every transfer down a hallway is measured to eliminate risk. Officers communicate with hand signals, radios, and coded routines practiced until they become muscle memory. They do not improvise. They do not hesitate. Any hesitation in a place like this can be exploited. Even their identities are protected. Many guards operate behind masks not for intimidation, but for safety. Outside these walls, people still remember the years when gangs controlled entire neighborhoods. No officer wants to be recognized on the streets for the work they do inside this fortress. In CECOT, anonymity is protection. Before entering the high-risk sections, every visitor and every officer undergoes security procedures more advanced than many airports. High-capacity scanners reveal what the eye cannot see. Technology capable of displaying internal objects ensures nothing foreign enters the prison. No electronics, no hidden chips, no items that could carry messages or instructions. Even a forgotten ring or chain must be surrendered before stepping further inside. Beyond security lies the armory, the backbone of CECOT's defensive system. Rows of equipment sit ready for the worst-case scenario. Riot shields, reinforced helmets, anti-impact gear, and multiple tiers of rifles suited for different distances and conditions. The officers train constantly not because riots are common, but because they cannot afford even one. Their job isn't to fight chaos, it's to prevent chaos from ever forming. Outside the buildings, small details reveal layers of control that most people would overlook. The gravel spread across certain pathways isn't decoration, it's an early warning system. Every footstep produces a sharp crunch, impossible to ignore, impossible to move across quietly. Even if an inmate somehow broke through the inner security rings, the sound alone would expose them long before they reached a wall. CECOT is built like a fortress within a fortress. Power lines are buried and protected. Water systems operate independently. Backup generators can sustain the entire structure for days without external support. Nothing inside the prison depends on the outside world. In a crisis, the facility can seal itself completely and remain functional. Yet the most unsettling part of CECOT is not the weapons, not the walls, not the electricity coursing through the perimeter fences. It's the certainty. The certainty that the men inside will never touch freedom again. Officers speak about it calmly, as fact. Inmates accept it in silence. There are no appeals, no dates to circle on a calendar, no countdowns. Only permanence. CECOT was not designed to rehabilitate. It was designed to contain completely, absolutely, without exception. And in this chapter, you begin to feel the weight of that design. Not through violence, not through fear, but through the overwhelming realization that nothing in this place, not a step, not a glance, not a breath, goes unobserved. CECOT doesn't just hold the most dangerous inmates. It eliminates the world where their power once existed. Life inside CECOT is not measured in days, but in repetitions. Every sound, every movement, every routine becomes part of a cycle that never changes. This prison was engineered so that time itself becomes a form of control, a slow, unbreakable weight that settles on both the inmates and the people assigned to guard them. For the prisoners, the day begins exactly the same way it ends, under constant watch. Lights remain bright at all hours. There's no dusk, no sunrise, no moment when darkness offers privacy or relief. Even sleep isn't a guaranteed escape. Towels cover their eyes to block the constant glare, but the noise of metal bunks and footsteps from the catwalks remind them that control never rests. Meals arrive on a strict schedule. No variation, no flavor, no comfort. The same combinations delivered 3 times a day enforce more than discipline. They erase choice. A plate of rice, beans, or pasta isn't just food. It's a reminder that every detail of life here is predetermined. The message is clear. The world they once dominated now dictates every second of their existence. When inmates leave their cells, it's not freedom, it's procedure. 1 hour a week, under supervision, inside a controlled environment. Even a simple act of walking is a privilege. Trainers lead basic exercises, while armed officers stand in formation, monitoring every breath, every motion, every interaction. There is no room for friendships, no space for alliances, no chance for organized structure. The very things that once made these men powerful are the things stripped from them first. And then there are the moments when someone breaks the rules. In a place built on silence and uniformity, any disruption is handled with absolute precision. The isolation cells become a final reminder of how serious the system treats disobedience. No sunlight, no noise, no sense of time, just concrete, dimness, and the weight of one's own thoughts. Even the toughest inmates, the ones who once commanded entire territories, are reduced to stillness. Inside those walls, the silence becomes something else, a punishment that touches the mind before the body. Outside the modules, guards move with a different burden. They are trained to remain anonymous. No names, no exposed identities, no personal traces. Masked faces are not just protection. They are a shield from a world where old loyalties still exist. Every guard knows that these inmates, despite their isolation, once belonged to networks capable of reaching far beyond any prison walls. But despite the relentless routine, something bigger hangs over this place: the question of permanence. The inmates know this is their final destination. There are no court dates, no appeals, no reunions. Just a system designed to ensure they never influence the outside world again. CECOT is more than a facility. It is a statement. A declaration that those who once ruled through fear will live the rest of their years under a fear they cannot escape. The fear of time, silence, and a future that leads nowhere. And as the days blur into each other, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This is not punishment for a moment. It is punishment for a lifetime. Inside CECOT, the concept of time eventually stops meaning anything. Days blend into weeks, weeks into months, and months into a single unbroken loop of silence, restriction, and observation. For the inmates who once shaped the streets of El Salvador, commanding fear, influence, and loyalty, this is the final destination. A place designed not to punish the body, but to contain the past. By the final stretch of our journey, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. CECOT isn't just a prison. It is a statement. Every locked door, every reinforced wall, every sleepless night under constant lighting sends the same message. The country these men once controlled has moved on without them. For the guards, this fortress represents victory over years of danger. They walk the upper platforms with discipline, knowing that one mistake could shift the entire balance inside the modules. Their job is not just security, it is stability. Each shift, each protocol, each silent walkthrough keeps a nation's peace intact. For the inmates, the reality is heavier. Many came here with reputations carved in fear. But inside these walls, their power has evaporated. They no longer command territories. They no longer give orders. They no longer shape the future. In CECOT, their identity is reduced to a number, a uniform, and a routine that will never change. Some attempt to reflect on their past, questioning what their lives could have been had they chosen a different path. Others cling to fragments of the world outside, memories of families they will never see again, moments that feel more like dreams than history. And for a few, acceptance slowly settles in. This fortress is their final address, the place where their influence, good or bad, ends permanently. Yet beyond the walls, the effects of CECOT remain a subject of debate. For many Salvadorans, the transformation is undeniable. Streets once controlled by fear now feel free for the first time in decades. Families can walk without looking over their shoulders. Businesses can operate without paying for protection. Peace, something once unimaginable, has become part of daily life. Still, the world watches closely. Some question the long-term consequences of total isolation and sweeping arrests. Others argue that the price of safety may have created new challenges, questions no one can yet answer. CECOT stands as both a triumph and a test, a warning to those who choose violence, and a symbol of what a nation will do to reclaim its future. As we exit the final corridor, the contrast between the outside world and the world behind these walls becomes stark. Freedom and confinement exist only a few steps apart. And for the inmates inside this mega-prison, those steps will never be taken. CECOT was built for one purpose: to ensure the most dangerous individuals never regain the power they once abused. And in that mission, the fortress stands unchallenged, silent, unmovable, and eternal. CECOT is more than a prison. It is a warning carved into concrete, a place built to end the power that once controlled an entire nation. Inside these walls, every step is monitored, every breath is restricted, and every life is permanently sealed away. But beyond the steel and the silence lies a bigger question. How far can a country go to protect itself without losing something in the process? For now, CECOT stands as a symbol of absolute control, a fortress built on the promise that the violence of yesterday will never return. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and share for more real-world prison documentaries from HFD Achive Crimes.